Have a look inside your fridge drawer right now. That bag of pre-shredded cheese sitting next to the butter, the one you grab for a quick Tuesday night pasta or Friday night tacos, isn't quite what you think it is. You assume it's just block cheese that someone else took the time to grate for you. But if you flip that packet over, you are going to find ingredients that have absolutely nothing to do with dairy. In fact, some of the most popular bags sold across Woolworths, Coles, and Aldi contain cheap industrial bulkers, anti-caking powders derived from plant fiber and wood pulp, and fungal preservatives designed to keep dead dairy looking fresh for months. And that is barely scratching the surface. In this investigation, we are cracking open 9 of the most trusted shredded cheese brands in Australia, ranking them from the mildly deceptive to the outright scandalous. Then, to make sure you do not leave empty-handed, I will show you the 3 cleanest, most cost-effective alternatives sitting on local shelves right now. By the time we reach the end, you will know more about supermarket dairy processing than the brand executives counting on your convenience habit. Stick around for the top entries, because the gap between what the glossy packaging promises and what independent lab tests actually reveal is going to leave you staggered. Before we call out the big brands, let us talk about how real cheese actually becomes the shredded stuff in the bag. True cheese is a remarkably simple creation. You take fresh milk, add active bacterial cultures to ferment it, mix in rennet enzymes to coagulate the proteins into curds, strain off the liquid whey, salt it, and let it age. That is literally it. 4 basic ingredients. When you take a solid block of traditional cheddar or mozzarella and run it across a hand grater at home, those exact 4 ingredients fall onto your plate. The moisture inside the block is filled with natural dairy fats, whey proteins, and rich flavor compounds. It is greasy, rich, and naturally wants to stick together because fat melts and bonds under slight pressure. Now consider what happens when a massive dairy corporation tries to do this on an industrial scale for thousands of supermarkets. They shred millions of kilograms of cheese inside high-speed commercial slicers. When millions of tiny cheese shreds sit compressed inside a plastic bag in a cold supply chain, they naturally want to fuse back into one giant congealed lump. To prevent this, manufacturers coat every single shred in a fine micropowder known as an anti-caking agent. In Australia, this is usually listed on the back of the packet under the generic code preservative 200-235 or simply anti-caking agent 460. Number 460 is microcrystalline cellulose. In plain English, that is refined plant fiber harvested from wood pulp and cotton lint. Industrial processes chemically digest, bleach, and grind this fiber down into an invisible, tasteless powder. The powder acts like millions of microscopic ball bearings, coating each individual shred of cheese so they slide past each other without sticking. But there is a massive catch that nobody mentions on the front of the packet. Cellulose is extremely hygroscopic, meaning it aggressively sucks up moisture. It pulls the natural fats and liquid out of the cheese matrix, locking it away so the shreds stay bone dry in the bag. When you buy a bag of pre-shredded cheese, you aren't just paying for convenience. You are buying cheese that has been deliberately dried out and bulked up with wood-derived fiber. That dry, chalky residue left on your fingertips after grabbing a handful of shredded cheddar isn't powdered cheese. It is the anti-caking agent doing its job. And because the moisture has been stripped, that cheese loses its ability to melt smoothly. Try melting heavily coated pre-shredded cheese into a creamy sauce, and you will end up with an oily, grainy mess where the cellulose refuses to integrate with the liquid. To make matters worse, stripping the moisture and exposing millions of tiny shreds to oxygen creates a giant breeding ground for mold. So the manufacturers have to add a second layer of chemical defense, antimicrobials and antifungals like natamycin, labeled locally as preservative 235. Instead of getting fresh dairy, you end up buying a highly engineered food product wrapped in clever marketing. The corporations know you are busy, so they charge you a premium price per kilogram for less actual cheese and more synthetic additives. Now that you know the hidden chemistry behind the convenience, let us dive into the actual brands sitting on Australian shelves. Now let us get into the core of this investigation, the 9 shredded cheese offerings sitting in Australian supermarkets right now, ranked from the slightly annoying to the absolute worst cases of corporate corner dash cutting. Starting at number 9, Bega Shredded Tasty Cheese. Bega is an absolute titan of Australian dairy, boasting iconic Aussie heritage and an image of wholesome, regional farm fresh goodness. It is the default choice that ends up in trolley after trolley at Woolworths and Coles. But when you flip that iconic red and blue packet around, you discover that Bega coats their shredded cheddar in anti-caking agent 460, cellulose powder, alongside preservative 200, potassium sorbate. While Bega charges around $21.00 per kilogram for this pre-shredded convenience bag, their exact same 500-gram block of Bega Tasty cheese, sitting directly next to it on the shelf, costs around $18.00 per kilogram. You are literally paying a 15% premium to buy cheese that has been dried out with wood pulp derived fiber and sprayed with chemical preservatives. When tossed onto a hot homemade pizza, those shreds hold their stiff shape far longer than they should before collapsing into a slightly waxy layer. Senior food technology consultants note that added cellulose strips the natural surface gloss from dairy fat, leaving a dull finish. Bega sits at number 9 because at least they are fully transparent on the ingredient label, but paying extra for chalky plant fiber is a rough deal for Aussie families. Moving to number 8, Hillview Shredded Tasty Cheese, available at Woolworths. Hillview is positioned as the ultimate budget tier option for shoppers trying to stretch every dollar during a cost of living crisis. At roughly $13.50 a kilogram, it looks like a massive bargain. But here is the catch. Hillview uses an ultra-fine shredding profile. Independent food testing shows that finer shreds dramatically increase the total surface area of the cheese per gram. More surface area means the manufacturer can apply a significantly higher proportion of anti-caking agent per pack without violating maximum standard ratios. You think you are getting a massive, fluffy bag of shredded cheese, but a substantial volume of what you are buying is trapped air and microcrystalline powder. Grab a handful and rub it between your fingers. Instead of the rich, oily residue of real dairy, your skin is left with a dry, dusty film. Choice consumer reviews frequently highlight that this budget shred refuses to melt smoothly, clumping into rubbery strings inside toasted sandwiches. Hillview charges less per bag, but they dilute the actual dairy density to hit that price point, turning a budget saver into a sneaky filler delivery system. Number 7 on our list, Perfect Italiano Shredded Mozzarella, produced by dairy giant Fonterra and stocked heavily across Coles and Woolworths. Perfect Italiano relies on heavy Italian branding, sleek packaging, and imagery that screams authentic pizzeria quality. You pay a premium price, often over $24.00 a kilogram, believing you are buying traditional, high-stretch mozzarella. But look at the back. It contains anti-caking agent 460 and preservative 235, which is natamycin. Natamycin is an antimycotic compound produced via fermentation of Streptomyces bacteria. While Food Standards Australia New Zealand permits natamycin in processed cheese, European Union guidelines strictly limit its application to the exterior surface of cheese rinds. In pre-shredded bags, however, it is mixed right throughout every single piece. You are paying top dollar for an artisanal Italian illusion, only to ingest industrial antifungal agents embedded deep into the cheese matrix. Culinary experts point out that pre-shredded mozzarella coated in cellulose fails to produce that iconic elastic stretch because the powder creates a physical barrier between protein chains. If you are already itching to check your own fridge drawer right now, hit that subscribe button because things get much rougher from here. At number 6, Kraft Dairy Shredded Cheddar. Kraft has been a household name in Australia for decades, traded on nostalgia and family trust. But Kraft Dairy represents one of the worst offenders when it comes to industrial recipe engineering. This product doesn't just use standard microcrystalline cellulose, it routinely incorporates added whey powder and emulsifying salts to stabilize the product during warm freight transit. When you melt this cheese over a casserole, the fat separates from the modified solids, creating a puddle of orange oil sitting on top of a rubbery crust. Price-wise, it sits around $22.00 a kilogram. The gap between consumer perception and actual ingredient reality is wider here than anywhere else on the supermarket shelf. Now we enter the top 3 worst cases, where corporate practices shift from clever marketing to serious legal battles and health hazards. Number 3, Community Co. Shredded Cheese, distributed through independent IGA stores across Australia. Community Co. is marketed as a friendly, community-supporting brand that gives back to local grocers. But because independent stores rely on complex third-party wholesale supply chains, oversight can be shockingly opaque. In several historical food safety audits and regional council inspections, third-party dairy packaging plants supplying independent white-label brands were cited for critical sanitation failures, including temperature control breaches in storage areas. When cheese is stored above recommended refrigeration temperatures during processing, pathogens like Listeria monocytogenes can proliferate. Listeria is a deadly bacterium, particularly dangerous to pregnant women and the elderly. While Community Co. offers cheap prices, the multi-layered, outsourced supply chain makes tracing exact product origins and quality control standards incredibly difficult for the everyday shopper. At number 2, Essential Everyday Fine Shred, imported and distributed across select discount grocers and wholesale outlets in Australia. This product represents the absolute bottom of the barrel. Independent laboratory testing on imported discount grated parmesan and fine shreds under this distribution umbrella revealed anti-caking agent levels exceeding 8.5%, more than double the accepted industry ceiling of 2% to 4%. When independent food chemists analyzed the samples, they found that the product was heavily bulked out with neutral plant cellulose and starch to lower production costs. Worse still, batch testing revealed trace levels of unlabeled soy lecithin used as a processing lubricant. For anyone with severe soy allergies, an undeclared allergen inside a bag labeled as pure cheese is a massive medical hazard. The product was cheap, selling for under 11.00 a kilogram, but consumers were essentially paying for a mix of dairy offcuts, excessive wood fiber, and unlisted processing aids. And finally, at number 1, the absolute worst case in shredded dairy history. Imported grated 100% Parmesan products sold through various commercial food service channels and discount grocers across Australia, originating from overseas processing plants like the infamous Castle Cheese facility. This wasn't just a case of adding a bit too much anti-caking powder, this was full-blown criminal fraud. Regulatory investigations by international authorities, mirrored by warnings from local Australian import inspectors, uncovered that products labelled as 100% pure grated Parmesan contained literally zero real Parmesan cheese. Instead, the bags were filled with cheap Swiss cheese trimmings, cheddar offcuts, mozzarella scraps, and up to 10% pure wood pulp cellulose. For over 2 decades, this facility manufactured fake cheese, storing raw materials in unrefrigerated rooms where listeria contamination was detected multiple times. The state inspector hired to oversee the plant actually resigned to take a high-paying executive job at the very company he was supposed to audit. When the criminal charges were finally laid, the executive pled guilty to federal food fraud charges. Yet despite defrauding millions of consumers out of millions of dollars and endangering public health, the executive received no prison time, just probation and a paltry $5,000 fine. That is less than the cost of a second-hand car for 20 years of selling fake, wood-pulp-filled cheese to unsuspecting families. It proves that when corporate greed meets weak oversight, the consumer gets treated like an absolute fool. Right, here comes the part that made watching this far worth it. We have spent the last 10 minutes picking apart the worst tricks of the industrial dairy complex. So now, let us talk solutions. You do not have to give up on cheese night, nor do you have to accept eating anti-caking wood pulp and antibiotic spray every time you make a toastie. There are phenomenal, honest options sitting on Australian supermarket shelves right now that deliver pure flavour, zero synthetic junk, and unbelievable value. We are counting down 3 of the best options you can pick up this week, moving from the most accessible mainstream bag to the undisputed king of clean dairy. Starting at best option number 3, Ashgrove Cheese Shredded Traditional Cheddar. Founded in the pristine Meander Valley of Tasmania, Ashgrove is an independent, family-owned Australian dairy business that controls every single step of production, from pasture-raised cows to the final packaging. Available at Woolworths, Coles, and independent Tasmanian grocers, Ashgrove offers a massive step up from commodity supermarket brands. While most commercial processors source bulk curd from anonymous wholesale suppliers and mix it with processing aids, Ashgrove uses pure Tasmanian milk from their own farms. When you open a bag of Ashgrove shredded cheddar, the difference is immediate. The aroma is rich, buttery, and slightly sharp, rather than smelling like cold plastic and starch. Because Ashgrove uses minimal anti-caking additives, relying on high-grade aging and precision shredding rather than drowning the product in microcrystalline cellulose, the shreds retain their natural dairy moisture. When melted under a grill, it forms a glossy, bubbling, golden layer that pulls apart with authentic stretch. Price-wise, it sits around $26.00 to $28.00 per kilogram. Yes, that is a few dollars more than the chemical-laden budget bags, but you are paying for actual milk solids and farm-gate integrity rather than refined plant fiber. Independent dairy judging panels consistently rank Ashgrove among Australia's finest commercial producers. If you insist on buying pre-shredded cheese for maximum convenience, this family-owned Tasmanian gem is the cleanest option on the mainstream market. Moving to best option number 2, Aldi Emperor/Happy Farms block cheese, specifically the mild and tasty varieties. This choice completely flips the traditional supermarket script on its head and proves that eating clean food does not require a luxury budget. For years, premium grocery brands have spent millions convincing you that cheap store-brand cheese is inferior. But Aldi's block cheese options, selling for an unbeatable $11.00 to $13.00 per kilogram, shatter that myth completely. When you buy an Aldi block of cheese, you flip the packet over to find precisely 4 ingredients: pasteurized milk, salt, starter culture, and non-animal rennet. Zero anti-caking agents, zero natamycin, zero cellulose, and zero filler. It is pure, unadulterated Australian cheddar at the absolute lowest price point in the entire country. A 2023 Choice Consumer Comparison found that Aldi's block cheeses scored higher in blind taste tests and structural purity than national brand name blocks, costing 40% more. By purchasing the block at Aldi and spending 60 seconds running it across a hand grater at home, you bypass every single industrial trick we exposed in Part 2. You get a completely clean, additive-free product for roughly half the price of pre-shredded brand name bags. It is the ultimate middle finger to corporate shrinkflation, making it the ideal choice for families who want to protect both their health and their grocery budget. And finally, best option number 1, buying any solid block of Parmigiano Reggiano PDO or traditional cheddar from Harris Farm Markets, Woolworths, Coles, or your local deli, and shredding it yourself. The single best choice on this entire list doesn't carry a shiny commercial logo. It is a fundamental return to real food. Whether you pick up an authentic aged Italian Parmigiano Reggiano bearing the official PDO stamp, or an Australian heritage block from Bega or Mainland, buying intact block cheese guarantees total immunity from corporate deception. Here is the culinary reality that changes everything. A solid block of cheese contains natural fats and moisture locked inside a stable protein matrix. Because the surface area is minimal compared to millions of tiny shreds, it requires no chemical anti-caking powders to prevent clumping and no synthetic antifungals to stop mold growth. When you grate a fresh block over hot pasta or into a bechamel sauce, the natural fats melt instantly and smoothly at low temperatures, creating a silky, restaurant-quality emulsion that never goes grainy or oily. Economically, the math is overwhelmingly in your favor. On a per-gram basis, solid block cheese is consistently 15 to 30% cheaper than its pre-shredded equivalent sitting on the exact same refrigerated shelf. You are literally paying extra money to allow food manufacturers to dry out your cheese and add wood pulp fiber. Taking 90 seconds to run a solid block across a box grater or pulsing it in a food processor gives you cleaner food, vastly superior flavor, perfect melting performance, and extra dollars back in your wallet. There is zero trade-off, only pure benefit. To make sure you never get taken for a ride in the dairy aisle again, here are 6 bulletproof rules to follow next time you are standing in Woolworths, Coles, or Aldi. Rule 1. Always calculate the price per kilogram, not the pack price. Check the unit pricing on the shelf tag. If the pre-shredded bag costs more per kilo than the block of the exact same brand sitting right beside it, you are literally paying a premium for added wood pulp. Rule 2. Flip the packet and count the ingredients. Real cheese requires only 4 items: milk, salt, starter culture, and enzyme. If you see a 5th ingredient, step back. Rule 3. Watch out for red flag codes like anti-caking agent 460 or microcrystalline cellulose. That is refined plant fiber harvested from wood pulp designed to absorb moisture. Rule 4. Avoid preservative 235, also known as natamycin, an antifungal antibiotic blended directly into American-style shreds that European regulators restrict to cheese rinds. Rule 5. Be extra suspicious of multi-cheese blends. Mexican 4 cheese or Pizza Supreme mixes routinely carry the highest filler ratios to stop different moisture levels from clumping. Rule 6. Ignore front-of-pack greenwashing. Terms like off the block or finely shredded are clever marketing hooks designed to justify extra powder coating per gram. At the end of the day, the supermarket dairy industry relies on one simple calculation: that you are too tired after a long workday to flip the packet over and read the back. They trade on your busyness, charging you higher prices for diluted, dried-out cheese loaded with industrial anti-caking agents and chemical preservatives. But once you realize that taking 90 seconds to grate a solid block at home saves you money while delivering vastly superior taste and health benefits, the entire corporate illusion falls apart completely. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into Australia's dairy aisle. If this investigation changed the way you look at your fridge drawer, do us a massive favor and share this video with a mate or family member who always buys the big pre-shredded bag. They deserve to know what they are actually paying for. Drop a comment below and tell me, which of these cheese brands is sitting in your fridge right now? And are you swapping to the block? Subscribe for more no-nonsense consumer exposés. Buy the block, shred it yourself, and keep your food real.